how do I actually build a company that actually runs on systems and doesn't require me to be involved in everything? I just hit barriers to growth. I just knew that the way I was approaching operating this business was not scalable, and I would have to figure out how to be able to move beyond that existing model. I recognized two things. One, is not a perfect system, right? It was fraught with their own challenges, and there were things that they did well and things that they were working on. But fundamentally, I benefited from, here is the structure to approach these common operational elements of your business.
So, Leighton, thanks for joining on this recording today. I think, had a great conversation at our event Capture in Orlando, where you kindly attended as our keynote speaker. It was our first time getting to know each other in person, and I was impressed kind of by the depth of the story you have. So maybe we can use today and this hour to go a little bit deeper. So welcome to our show, Leighton, from Know How.
Yeah.
But maybe you do the very first introduction yourself rather than me trying to imitate.
You bet. Well, it was a great event. I thought your team knocked it out of the park. You made everyone feel. We have one of our values at Know How is making our team members and our customers feel loved and appreciated. And I think that your team shares that value. I felt, broadly, I think, not to speak on behalf of everyone that attended, but I think the broad sentiment was that there was a lot of work that went into making people feel welcome. Introduction to myself. So my name's Leighton. I'm the CEO at Know How. Know How today is the leading AI knowledge platform in the property restoration space. Our focus at Know How is essentially to solve some of the time-worn problems of how do you capture the way we do things easily? How do you equip someone on your team in a way that is easy to use and relevant to the workforce today? Functionally speaking, we help customers onboard their staff rapidly, equip them with the how-to that they need to do their job, and then to be able to free up time from management and foremen and owners that's often just spent in the work of re-explaining and being that kind of human frequently asked question machine. And so our focus is on, really, I would say, helping companies to be able to operate more efficiently, more profitably, to really just help companies accelerate and grow and be more successful. And I've been very, I've been just very thankful to the industry. They've embraced Know How, and I think it's been exciting to see some of the results. We were just looking at the return on investment that our product achieved last year, and I think it ranged from our smallest companies averaging an 18x ROI, all the way up to some of our largest companies achieving like a 38 to 48x ROI in terms of dollars spent to us based on just overall horsepower, in terms of dollar saves, dollar made, time saved. So that was really exciting. My background is, if I was just to say, to kind of prune some of the details just to make it as relevant as possible to your audience. Small town kid, moved to a large city to start a construction company, had success early, but recognized my own shortcomings in my ability to think about how do I actually build a company that actually runs on systems and actually doesn't require me to be involved in everything. Now, that's probably language that I didn't know at that time. All I knew is that I was working way too hard, and I was finding that my staff, I just hit barriers to growth. I ended up purchasing a franchise, a trades franchise, at a young age. I was 19, and they gave me a structure and a community to be part of, and I really accelerated. So I very quickly became the top performing franchise operator in that network. That was in the industry that it was in residential and kind of residential and some commercial painting, and really kind of blew a lot of the historical results out of the water. and developed a real knack, I think, for building teams, driving effective results with teams, and really being able to drive productivity in labor workforces, productivity and loyalty, and just vibrant. We had a very vibrant work experience, and I think that the franchisor, the corporate entity, recognized that skill set. I had the opportunity to kind of make a transition and join the what eventually became the executive team in this franchise network, and was able to play a very formative role, helping that network to just be a market leader across upwards of 400 locations. Became very apparent of, let's call it, the challenges of maintaining service consistency, employment experience consistency across all those locations, across all those language groups, and just began to recognize that the tools available of the day, from the way we train people, the way we support people, the way we guide people, they were just insufficient in many, many ways, and so decided to do something about that. And fast forward to where I am today. Know how, in part, is a response to some of the pain that I experienced being part of a team where we led thousands of trade and labor workers across North America.
Okay, there's a lot in there. So maybe, as you said, fast forward. I would like to rewind a little bit, and it hasn't been yesterday, but I think that is a position that maybe some of our listeners are in. But could you bring us back to the time where you said, "Hey, okay, I'm not an independent anymore, and you
Mm-hmm.
took the decision to go into buying into a franchise." I mean, what
Mm-hmm.
were the effects that you immediately saw there? Is that something that still resonates with you today, or where you still build on from that time today?
Mm-hmm. Well, fundamentally, I think of a franchise is kind of like a three-legged stool. They essentially have a licensed brand that we all benefit from. There is a contract, in place that outlines the terms of our relationship, and then there is a system. There's a way we do things. And I think that the franchise model, when you compare, all the pros and cons, I think it's a tremendous model. It has a lot of it offers a lot of opportunities, a lot of perks, and I know that not every franchise network is created or managed equally, but by and large, it has a lot of merits to it. So I think, to get at your question, um, I think what I recognized is that time is short, and I had to essentially do, as an economist would say, I had to balance and make kind of I had to consider trade offs. And so, on one side, being fully independent, there are some advantages, right? There's the ability, perhaps you're not giving a margin to royalty or some kind of service fee. You may have a level of independence in your ability to how you represent and brand yourself. But I think at that young age, largely what I recognized is that time is a valuable resource, and is there a value that I can place on figuring all this out, and essentially not having to make all of the missteps on my own. And at that age, I really, in a sense, weighed in the scales of my own decision making, that I I faced a crossroads where I just knew that the way I was approaching operating this business was not scalable, and I would have to figure out how to be able to move beyond that existing model. And I think that we all make the best decision we can based on the information and the opportunities in front of us. And at that time, I had a good friend of mine who was having a lot of success in that franchise model, and so he introduced me to it. And so I think there was that relationship connection as well. And then as soon as I got involved, I recognized two things. One, it's not a perfect system, right? It was fraught with their own challenges, and there were things that they did well and things that they were working on. But fundamentally, I benefited from, you know, here is the structure, here are the numbers, here are the metrics to optimize for. Here are some examples of how to approach these, you know, these common operational elements of your business. But more importantly, here are some running mates. Here are some friendly competitors, right? Here is an individual who is in this part of the country or this part of North America where a number that you thought was unachievable, they do that every other year, or they do that every year. And immediately, I think just not only the presence of systems, not only the presence of community, I think just a direct line of sight on individuals that were achieving levels of performance that I just didn't think were possible. And so what I see generally in independent businesses is that I think your average independent business rarely, not I would say, well, I think it's less common in an independent business that they are part of some type of network or or they have some type of practice of, you know, lifting the periscope up and comparing themselves against other performances. I think by and large, you know, the companies in their community, you know, don't publicly share kind of what their revenue, you know, what they achieve in terms of revenue. But when you're a franchise network or you're in a similar related model, you know, the numbers are very transparent. And so sometimes, you know, the barriers in our own minds of what's possible are really just shattered when we see people achieving levels of performance and then recognizing that there's a delta between, well, where I am now and clearly what they're doing. And so I think it created in me, I think, a belief and kind of a hunger to be able to close that gap. And then fast forward, you know, several years later, you know, my team and I were achieving, you know, we were probably doing, I don't know, maybe 450% more than the average business in that network, and doing so with a staff that was still very small and lean. And so then we became that North Star that a lot of companies would benchmark themselves on. And so I would say I experienced the inspiration and the motivation of seeing these amazing performances. And then fast forward 36 months later, I was that, um, you know, inspiration for others, kind of shattering their own notions of what was possible.
Yeah, I mean, especially at that young age, having a team of running mates, and I guess also at that age, one is super ambitious already, so and competitive. So those two factors certainly seem to be the perfect fit for you. But when you say the franchise system is a three-legged stool, I assume that kind of like you as buying into it then put the fourth leg to it to make it whole. Do I read that right? Or and I think also what I would wonder now is some of those elements that you've discovered there with the franchise system. I'm assuming you are replicating now with know-how in terms of, hey, we can guide you getting some of those elements, maybe not the branding, but maybe the kind of like more systems and a more systemized approach.
I would say to an extent, you know, the idea of like, yeah, then I become that fourth leg. Yeah, you know, it's a good way of thinking about it. I don't know if I've ever framed it that way. It's an interesting perspective. So I think number one is, for many of our clients who are franchise networks, we in a sense become know-how is in a sense the very private, secure home of that third leg, the system. And it's in a way it is the tool that they use to both provide, manage, curate, and optimize their system. Now, for companies that aren't franchises, I mean, really, every organization, I think we all recognize that the operational rhythms of our business, you know, could and I would argue should be reduced to, what are the most optimal dance moves that, when I would say, when made, you know, parts of how your business operates become sources of predictable outcomes. I would say that there are many areas of a service business in particular where reinventing the wheel each time we take that action, the creative, let's call it enhancement, compared to the actual business output is very marginal, in the sense that, for example, the way that we say pursue collecting, or say the way we invoice, and the way that we pursue, say, accounts receivable. The fact is that by and large, there is a methodology that a business would arrive at that would say this is probably the optimal way to do this in 70% of circumstances. And taking a creative twist every single time we pick up the phone, or every single time we think about contacting a customer, or every time we think about invoicing it, it's really like, it's, as we say, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. So then the question arises, I would say, just practically speaking, is, well, if we've established a methodology or an approach or a way of doing something, well, where does it live? And how do we give that to our team in a format that's easy? And what if it changes? And what if the person receiving it, English isn't the language they prefer to read in? And what about if there's nuances depending on the customer or depending on the situation? Well, I think know-how today is just the best solution to those problems. We didn't create the problem that we solve. I like to joke sometimes that, when they were erecting the pyramids, they suffered from the same problem that we solve. It's the way these things all fit together is in that guy's mind. He just got squished by a giant block, and so we're totally screwed, right? We should have done something to, in a sense, make the knowledge that is siloed in his mind accessible, disseminate it more broadly. And so, because he's on lunch or he's underneath that rock, we have really hampered our ability to be as productive as possible.
That's a really interesting point there, because I think that is where kind of my shared experience in the field agrees with you the most, is like this individual decision making. um, Especially, you say service industries, but I feel especially in like restoration, remodeling, where it's also dependent on the situation on site. So not every building is created equal, right? There's different context to your decision, and you need to, I think, reduce the mental load of replicating the same outcome, and try to prepare that for that setup that you encounter. So making it really specific to where you are, what's your circumstances around it, and then helping to, yeah, reach a similar outcome. Because in the end, it's not predetermined like in a burger joint. Like how you put together a burger is always the same, but it's not exactly the same in kind of varied and different sites. But eventually you want to have an end result that resembles something that you would expect, and not which seemingly happened and was created by choice or chance.
Yeah, totally. And one of the things that I learned at your event, which I thought, yeah, I think your listeners, I think they should know, is really just like the substantial success that you've had in just building and scaling construction service companies. And what I recall from your story is, you established this dominant company that specializes in, essentially renovation services of a certain size and scale. And I thought that was really interesting. I think it provides a deep level of qualification, for you and your leadership team, that I think the average Magic Plan user may not even be aware of. That you have spent, in a sense, far more time doing stuff that looks a lot like what they do on a daily basis than, scaling a technology company, and you're doing both very well.